country folks can survive. Because you can't starve us out and you can't make us run. Those William old boys raised on shotguns. We say grace, we say ma'am.
All right, now, without further ado, thank you, Mr. Patrick Henry. I'm going to introduce you to a buddy of mine. I met him at SRF. Funny, I keep saying that about a lot of our speakers. Met him at SRF. I've known his dad for damn near 20 years now. William Bond, you've heard him and watched him do the demonstrations. Now he's going to speak to you about lessons learned from doing work in Hurricane Helene. So, William Bond, everybody.
All right. Thank you guys so much. Yeah, as many of you guys, some people may have forgotten, but there was a hurricane that hit North Carolina, East Tennessee, and then a little bit of South Carolina. But this was one of the first hurricanes that have traveled over 300 miles inland and then intensified, which is crazy. It wasn't naturally occurring. This might be a shocker to some people, but that was not a natural hurricane. If you want more information on how that wasn't a natural hurricane and the actual facts and data to back that up, check out Dane Wigington over at geoengineeringwatch.org. Imagine a hurricane hitting the coast. Usually they start dying down once they hit the coast. But this one hit the coast, intensified over western North Carolina, and then stood still. The amount of water that fell was, imagine all the water that goes over Niagara Falls in a year, double that, and that's how much fell there in just a matter of a couple of hours. And these are in climates. I mean, I deal with, climates. This is my job, to analyze 100-year rain and drought events and then adjust your property according to the events. The records that are beat in that part of North Carolina are very, very set. If there's let's say the record flood event is 21 feet and it gets beaten, usually it's beaten by 21 feet and 3 inches or 21 feet and 1 inch. That's a big, big deal. This was beaten by 20 feet in certain areas. That's how big of a difference there was. There was a town called Marshall. It's in Madison County. There's a town named Marshall. They went through a severe flood in about 1910, somewhere around there, might be 1914, and the entire town wiped out. So they were like, all right, when we rebuild this town, we're going to do this like 20 feet above the last flood line, or the last floodplain, and they got wiped out again. That's how big these floods were, and it completely devastated that area. It was kind of odd because there were certain parts, like Mars Hill, for example, that was relatively unaffected. But if you go to the east just a little bit, over to Burnsville, completely devastated. If you go to the west just a little bit, over into Barnardsville, completely devastated. So there was like a bunch of hit and miss. There was over 200 tornadoes that were recorded in this area. Picture tornado in the mountains. Usually the tornadoes get hit by the mountains and then they stop. They don't usually happen in the mountains. There were over 200 going on there. The official death toll, I want to say, is about 248 or something around there. I can show you one holler where more than 248 people were wiped out. I can show you one location where that happened. Glen Raven, which is a textiles company over in Burnsville, they were, I think they sewed together about 10,000 body bags. How many of those they use, it's kind of unknown because we're lied about like how many people actually died, but entire communities are wiped out. Like if I were to take you to some of these places, you'd think like, okay, yeah, there was a flood, but you don't know really the before and after. Like you didn't know that there was a whole community along this holler until like you see the before pictures and you're like, wow, there was actually some severe devastation here. You can see some of the roots of these mountains exposed. I believe a lot of the reason that they were targeted by these weather weapons is because we need a lithium source. We pulled out of Afghanistan. That's where we're getting a lot of lithium from the Chinese mines over in Afghanistan. A lot of cobalt, stuff like that. We're not on good relations with the United Nations or anything like that. So before we pulled out of Afghanistan, that was the cheapest way to get lithium into the country. Since we pulled out, it's no longer the cheapest way to get lithium into the country. They knew about the lithium in those mountains in western North Carolina, but they left it alone for two reasons. It was a more expensive source, and there's a lot of generational land there that's been in the family for like 7 to 8 generations. And even though these people might be broke, they'd rather die than sell their land. So they forcibly evicted these people from the land. To the point, like, there's so much lithium in that area, as you're driving along the creeks and the rivers or even the ponds, you just see the pink lithium salts just all up on the side of the banks and everything like that. It completely devastated a lot of people. A lot of people's mutual assistance groups fell apart. It was a test for a lot of these people, and a lot of the mutual assistance groups fell apart. I had actually consulted for some of these people within these groups, and I can confirm they fell apart, and I'll list the reasons they fell apart, and also some of the reasons or some of the things that I learned in this disaster zone, and things that I have to adjust to myself because of what I witnessed in this disaster zone. So first trip going out there, it was about a week after the event. I'm going out there to meet Bears Group, obviously, Grindstone Ministries over in Cherry Grove, which is just across the border in Tennessee, in Irwin, Tennessee. Something that would take me about 15 minutes to get to Johnson City took me 45 minutes because all the bridges were washed out and you had to go different routes and everything. And it's not like Kansas where you can drive. I can drive through this field in Kansas. Can't do that in Tennessee because there's mountains in the way, so you got to go around. So everything took far longer to get around. Supply chains were shut off. There was limited amount of access. But, yeah, so I started over in Grindstone, working out of Cherry Grove. And me and another guy were teamed up on a recon team to go and, like, investigate what needed what and who needed what and, like, what teams we could send where. So we were able to see, like, a large portion of the area just by being on that recon team. The first thing that I noticed was that everybody was immediately in need. You would think it would be food and water, but everybody was immediately in need of fuels. Everybody had generators for the most part, even though they hadn't been used in 10 years. Everybody had generators, and everybody was short on fuel. Even those, like the farms that have those, like 300-gallon fuel tanks that are elevated and stuff, they went through that like crazy because they were also helping their neighbors. Fuel was a big one. So people that had solar systems that still had structures standing, they were able to use their solar systems and kind of charge other people's batteries and stuff, but very, very limited. Also, North Carolina isn't necessarily it's a temperate rainforest, that part. So it's not a whole lot of sun days. Like if you go to Taos, New Mexico, you get 360 sun days out of 365. That's not the case in North Carolina. You get consistent rain throughout the year with maybe a drought in August to October. Keep that in mind. That's another drought period, and that's when the hurricane happened out there, was during October. But yeah, fuel sources. Everybody was running out of fuel sources almost immediately. Those that were left ran out of fuel sources almost immediately. So that's one thing that every time we went out on a trip, we had the whole truck bed full of gas cans, diesel cans, and yeah, we're giving people food or fuel. The next thing that most people ran out of, because they live in a temperate rainforest and nobody's really concerned about water out there, was clean drinking water. So before, like most other disasters, you can think like, oh, I can just go down to the creek and I can harvest water there. I can just filter it real quick, boil it or something like that, and then it'll be good to go. That wasn't the case there. Also, there's a lot of mountain springs that had existed in that area that no longer were there because of the amount of erosion that occurred during all of that rain. So that was something that a lot of people took for granted, was their water sources, but they didn't have access to those anymore. Also, the water was heavily contaminated. Everywhere we tested, my parents are doing a soil reclamation program. I can't remember the name of their GoFundMe. I should remember it. Sorry, y'all. Yeah, Living Soil Foundation. Thank you so much. Yeah, they have a Living Soil Foundation where they're fixing the soil. And if anybody took that compost class yesterday, that's exactly how they're fixing that soil. They're using the compost in addition with archaebacteria, and they're fixing the soil. So it was actually cleaner than it was before. But everywhere that they tested the soil, it was heavily contaminated with forever chemicals like dioxins. A lot of PVC manufacturing chemicals were in the soil. Also, radiation. Where did the radiation come from? There was a nuclear fuels facility over in Irwin, Tennessee that was alongside the river. They claimed that they had no leaks, but everywhere around there test positive for radiation. Also, Oak Ridge barrels popped up out of nowhere. For the Oak Ridge barrels to have washed from Oak Ridge, Tennessee, it would have had to have gone upstream, jogged over to a different river, and then back upstream again. So that makes you think, like, obviously they didn't come from Oak Ridge, so it makes you think that they have some sort of deposit area in the mountains that washed up and got swept downstream and everything like that. But everywhere they tested, which was multiple locations, the forever chemicals, the PVC manufacturing chemicals, and the radiation popped up everywhere. But state of North Carolina says it's perfectly fine. There's no issues at all because they care about you. So there's no issues at all. It's perfectly safe to drink, perfectly safe to filter and all that stuff. Go ahead and let your kids play in the side of the rivers and all that. Don't worry about it. Even their own testing proves otherwise, but that's a different story. Yeah. So, water. You don't have access to that water source anymore. A lot of the springs that people were able to use got shifted or just got covered up in sediment and mud and stuff like that. So you no longer have access to springs. You no longer have access to the rivers and the ponds. Some ponds just completely disappeared, and then other ponds were newly created. But even then, you can't get access to that water. And let's just ignore the PVC manufacturing, the dioxins, and the radiation. We also have the issue of septic tanks running downstream. We also have the issue of decomposing bodies running downstream. Because remember, Glenn Raven made 10,000 body bags. I was on one trip with he was a first responder. He was a part of the search and rescue teams, like immediately after. And everywhere we went, he just kept pointing to fields. He's like, yeah, the cadaver dogs, they stopped looking in here. Or they didn't stop looking, but they just sat down. We thought something was wrong with the cadaver dogs, and then we moved them a little bit, and then they sat down. That's because that whole field was covered in bodies. There's bodies everywhere. Everywhere you go, there are decomposing bodies. Any place where there's sediment, the cadaver dogs would just sit down. Also, those cadaver dogs are now dead. All those cadaver dogs, I think except for one, have died from whatever chemicals they were exposed to. A whole fire department crew in Newport, Tennessee, a lot of those guys are dying. I think 5 people have died so far, and they were part of the initial search and rescue teams out there. They were in the water. They were part of the was it Quick Water Rescue something? Yeah, those guys are dying. And they also had severe chemical burns along their legs and their bodies. Dr. Will was able to help a lot of them out, but some of the other guys are just straight up dying. And it's a good question. Whatever they were exposed to in the water. And then they were also confirmed, because Dr. Will was, taking care of a lot of them. They, and by the way, if you guys have any questions at any point, just shout it out. Another thing that Dr. Will made sure that he took a note of before, helping them out was seeing if any of them got jabbed up. This whole fire department crew in Newport, Tennessee, none of them got jabbed up. They were all standing in solidarity against that. Nobody got jabbed up. So they were directly dying from whatever they were exposed to in the water when they were in the water helping people, trying to help people. So water source completely contaminated. Believe it or not, food was way down on the list. You can fast for quite a while and just be fine. Food was way down on the list. Number 3 that I learned was medication. There were a lot of people who did not have stockpiled medication. A lot of you guys know that, to put back medication and everything. But yeah, a lot of people didn't have stockpiled medication. A lot of people were hoofing, literally hiking medication into some of these places to help people. There was one guy that I can think of in particular that I don't know what kind of disease this was, but he had to have blood withdrawn because his body made too much blood or something. He had to have blood withdrawn every so often, and he was about 3 weeks late. And it was 2 weeks late whenever he started telling people that he needed this, and it was 3 weeks late whenever somebody finally got over there to help him out. I think he ended up being fine, but there's another thing. He lived in a very inaccessible part of Elk Ridge, Tennessee, that's you can't go. And then he's also he wasn't able to get around very well. And if he did get around, it had to be a motorized scooter or wheelchair, and that just ain't a possibility at that point. So we had to bring a doctor to him to get the blood withdrawn, and then had to schedule that every so often so we can maintain that. But medications. There were also a lot of people in the city of Asheville going through withdrawals. Asheville has been hit really bad with the opiate pandemic, or the opiate thing going on with the fentanyl and all that stuff. There are a lot of people who were just straight up losing their minds on the street because they weren't able to get their fix. I mean, it looked like I Am Legend on the streets of Asheville for a little bit, and it still kind of does. But people weren't able to get their fix. People started withdrawing on the streets. And also in Asheville, a bunch of homeless encampments that were along the river, those aren't even accounted for. We don't even know how big those homeless encampments were, but they're gone. They called them tent cities and stuff. They were along the river and everything. Those guys are completely gone. We'll never really find out about what happened with them unless they start excavating by the river or something. But yeah, so biggest thing was fuel. The next biggest thing was water. The third biggest thing was medication. But the reason, and then food was later down on the list. Most people had like at least a few things in the cupboard that they could keep on eating, or somebody in the neighborhood was, squared away. But the thing that stood out most to me in that area was they had something that people in Philadelphia wouldn't have, or the people in Lawrence didn't have, or the people in like bigger cities that didn't have. They had community. Like everybody knew their neighbor, or like in some cases everybody was related to each other. That's a different story, but you get stuck in a holler too long, that family tree goes up and down. But everybody was related to each other, or they knew their neighbor, or they knew who was within the community. They were able to barter and help each other out. Like somebody had, let's say Miss Mary Lou was stuck up in her cabin up off the river, and she can't get out with her tractor or with her truck. Well, the farmer down over here had just so happened to have a tractor that was in higher elevation. He's able to do as long as his fuel holds out, he's able to do a lot of the excavating enough so people can get in and out. The community was what kept these people from dying after the event. That was a big one, and we just kept making the remarks like if this had happened really anywhere else, there would still be deaths occurring. Like people would still be dying. That was a big one. So like I went into this thinking like I knew community was important, but it's something I've always avoided. Like I was never really big on like, the hardest part of permaculture isn't the farming, isn't the gardening, isn't the growing food part, it's the people part. There's 3 ethics of permaculture: earth care, people care, and return the surplus to the first 2 ethics. The people care is the hardest doggone part. That's the variable you have really no control over, but that's also the variable that kept these people alive and kept them from dying after the event, to an extent. To an extent. There were some looters and stuff, but that got handled pretty quickly because it's in the mountains of Tennessee, or in North Carolina. That got handled pretty quickly. But community was the reason these people did not die after the event, and the reason that literally any improvement has happened over there. Since then, they've received $2 billion in funding. Not a dime has been, like if I take you guys out to Asheville right now, it looks the same as it did right after the disaster. It looks exactly the same. The only improvements that have gone on in Western North Carolina is the improvements made by like private volunteers, the people that have just felt it in their heart that they needed to go help. That's the only way that these people improved at all. That's the only reason they have even electricity. Like the linemen were just like, yeah, I'm on the clock 24/7 now. Until these people get power before winter comes in, I'm on the clock 24/7. It wasn't like North Carolina Power or North Carolina Department of Transportation were like, yeah, you guys, we're going to have to, kick it up a bit. We're going to have to work a little bit longer. They were willing to work for free to make sure that the elderly, their neighbors and stuff like that did not freeze to death during the winter. And they got the power back on in record time in some of these hollers. It was projected like 8 to 10 months for water and power, and they were able to get it in within like 3 months. It's still a long time, but they were able to get it in some of these hollers. There's still some places that have no power. But in some of these other areas, like in Pensacola, which is just outside of Burnsville, that's where they beat the expected time by 5 months. But it was a strong sense of community that held everything together and stopped people from dying after. And that has probably been the biggest thing that stuck out to me since then, that we cannot do this on our own. Like you might have all the preps in the world, but if a flood wipes out your house with all your preps in it, you no longer have anything. You have to rely on your neighbor or your community that you built prior to the disaster to help you out. And then also, like, this is where some of those mutual assistance groups fell apart. There were some people that were completely unaffected, and then somebody else in their membership got completely wiped out. Like they were alive, but everything that they owned was wiped downstream. The other people that had everything were not willing to take in the people that had nothing at that point. They were only in the mutual assistance group as long as it benefited them, or if they could learn from somebody or they could train under somebody and benefit themselves. So having a strong community before the disaster happens that has been well tested, like that, without rule of law. This was an awesome game. The last night was the first time I played this game, and it was pretty interesting. If you're really trying to test some people out, play it sober. But yeah, otherwise, emotions get involved and all that. But yeah, play that game, test people out, and build the community beforehand. before the disaster strikes, because you want to be able to vet these people. You want to be able to see how they react in bad conditions and stuff like that. Because it's still shocking to me that, well, it doesn't surprise me that the government did nothing to help. But the only reason these people survived, again, the only reason these people survived and the only reason they are where they are now is because of their strong sense of community in the area. Now, speaking of government, oh, go ahead. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So another thing that really stuck out was the lack of communications, because like I'm really good at growing food. I'm pretty much crap at everything else. Like radio stuff doesn't make any sense to me. Like I don't comprehend it at all. I don't know what's going on with my brain on that. But yeah, communications was a big thing. A lot of people, because you're in these hollers, like you barely have cell signal. But yeah, the only way we were able to communicate back with Grindstone was by way of radio, and even then the radios didn't work. But there was this one guy that he called it the cantenna, and he had an ammo can, and in it he had like a foldable antenna, and literally we were on the other side of Mount Mitchell, and he like, excuse my terminology because I don't know what I'm talking about, but he sent like a signal to Mount Mitchell, it bounced off, and then it hit the home base over at Cherry Grove, and we weren't even close to Cherry Grove, and he was still able to communicate that way. But a lot of people were shut off completely. There's a town called Little Germany. They had one way in, one way out, and that was across a river. The only reason anybody knew that they were cut off from society is because there was one ham radio operator in there. Of a group of about 40 people, there was one ham radio person in there. And he was able to get the word out, like saying, hey, we're stranded. We are completely cut off from everything. We need supplies. So then we knew to, like, okay, we need to get a raft. We need to get some people that are sure-footed, and we need to start hauling stuff in there. Actually, it was a stupid idea, but somebody even, like, 2 people carried in a washer and a dryer to these people. Like, I thought washboards and clothing lines would have worked, but no, they were uppity. So they needed a washer and dryer. But, yeah, communications was a big one. And then as far as FEMA goes, it depended on where you were. Now, I will say, like, the National Guard and FEMA to a lesser extent, but the National Guard would get in the way if you weren't part of an organization. Like, if I had that grindstone, like, visor or vest up in the windshield, I was able to get anywhere I needed to go. There was no restrictions. But they were, I think, to a certain extent, worried about looters, and knowing that kind of made sense. Also, I had a guy in the passenger seat that spoke military, so he said you needed to build up the National Guard, and you needed to degrade the 82nd Airborne. I don't get it, but that's the way he said you need to communicate with these guys. But yeah, so as long as you were with an organization, you were pretty much able to go anywhere you wanted to. So there was that. Did you have a question? Yeah. Yeah, the doctors, a lot of the doctors were overtime. Asheville Mission Hospital turned into a morgue for a short period of time. That's where they brought whatever recovered dead body. Okay, Asheville Hospital at one point had more dead bodies than the official death toll of Asheville. It's insane. But so as far as like, okay, so on the topic of FEMA was largely not there. There was one disaster relief center in Asheville, North Carolina, which nowhere is fast. You're not going to get anywhere fast in the mountains before the disaster because you can't go through mountains. You got to go around them. So something that takes me 18 miles away here in Kansas takes me 18 minutes to get to. In North Carolina, it takes you an hour and a half to get to because you got to go around stuff. FEMA had one disaster relief disaster relief center, and it was in Asheville, North Carolina. If I'm in Burnsville, I have to go up to Tennessee, over, and then back down into Asheville just to get there. That's a 3-hour trip. Then you don't have a vehicle anymore. And they were saying that, hey, if you need disaster relief, come to the disaster relief center, and then we'll get you squared away. I have not met anybody who's received that $700 loan. It was a loan, not just, here's money, do what you need to. I haven't met anybody who's received that loan. Yeah, and then that was the one disaster relief center in North Carolina. There was another disaster relief center in Irwin, Tennessee. So me and 2 other guys, we walk into the disaster relief center in Irwin, Tennessee, and they have like they converted some high school building into like this complex for like various disaster relief like organizations. And we went and talked to FEMA, and we're trying to find out what is available to these people so we could start spreading the word, like, hey, okay, you lost your house, go here, and then they'll try to work with you on the money or find you lodging and stuff. So we went to Irwin, Tennessee, and I asked the guy it was a table full of 4 DEI hires that couldn't get off their phone long enough to look any of us in the face. They didn't know if we were part of the victims or part of the crew helping. They had no idea. One guy looked up, and I was asking him, I was like, hey, there's some people just right across the border in North Carolina. I know this is Tennessee, but can they come here instead of traveling that 3-hour trip to Asheville? Because it was like 45 minutes versus 3 hours total, and that's one way. And then he didn't know the answer, so he called up his boss. He got done talking to his boss, and then he got back with me, and he said, yeah, they could, but that's a lot of paperwork, so try to send them to the Asheville location. Not a single person was in this entire building looking for help. Like, we were the only people in there wandering around trying to get answers to some questions we had. It's not like they were busy. They just couldn't get off their phone long enough to actually help these people who went through this. But yeah, the only FEMA location that people could go to actually receive help was in Asheville. Now, something that was curious was that in a couple locations, FEMA had dropped off a single pallet of water in a random field, and that went untouched. I don't know if there was some sort of word about like, hey, don't drink that FEMA water or what, but there was like those pallets of water might be in that field to this day. Every time I went out there, that pallet of water was in the same field, and it was completely untouched. Nobody would touch the FEMA water. And then also another thing that FEMA did, they would drop off a tent at random like drop-off locations or supply points. They would drop off a tent, and then they would claim that that is their like supply point. In fact, Grindstone Supply Point over at Cherry Grove was supposedly FEMA's #1 supply point in the whole disaster area. FEMA was pushing out more material out of that and supplies out of that one location than anywhere else in North Carolina. And they didn't drop off a single thing over there. The one thing that the government did like immediately after, like one thing that they were super on the ball about was vaccination tents. Like that was wild. Yeah, immediately, almost overnight, there were vaccination tents everywhere for every possible thing you could think of. They were also by themselves, too. Because, well, in the city of Asheville, people will, like, trip over themselves trying to go get vaccinated. But out in the hollers and stuff like that, they already don't trust the government. They've been fighting the ATF for I don't even know how many years. Yeah, they don't trust the government. They're not about to go get vaccinated. So I'm glad I can speak freely here. Thank you, Bobby. This is awesome. I'm getting some stuff off my chest today. But, yeah, the ATF, alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, that's all of the mountains of Western North Carolina. Like, that's their livelihood, alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. So they're used to fighting the government. They're used to fighting the good fight. And, yeah, so that's the way the government was immediately vaccination tents right after the disaster, and everywhere, too. And, in fact, they tried to do it over at the Grindstone location, and that didn't happen. They put up their signs, and everybody was like, what's the deal with this? And then there were no more signs, and there were no more people giving vaccinations. But, yeah, so just a little recap. The water, the power, the running out of fuels, the medications, and then communications were some of the big points, and then making sure that you have established community beforehand. Now, regarding this whole lithium land grab, if you want further further proof that this was a manufactured storm, 2 years prior to that event going on, there were 3 lithium battery plants that were approved just south of the border in South Carolina. And everybody's like, this doesn't make any sense. Where are we going to get the lithium? They had no idea. So they started building these. I think one was BMW, one was Milwaukee, and then another one I don't remember, maybe Tesla or something like that. But those got approved 2 years before this event even happened. Now, another location that has a lot of lithium and cobalt is where I live in Texas. East Texas going into western Arkansas, that's a big lithium and cobalt area, but they might not wipe it out because a lot of the lithium can be derived as a waste stream from the processing of natural gas. So that may or may not be safe. I don't know. They might get greedy. Who even knows? But, yeah, are there any other questions, by the way? Yeah. The Hawaiian fire, I mean, that was another, Who knows about directed energy weapons? Yeah. So you notice all the blue roofs stayed put, right? That's a good way to protect your house. Put a blue tarp over it, and then it seems like directed energy weapons don't seem to like. How does let's say I have a tree right where Bobby's standing, right? And I have a bonfire about this far away. Let's say that's a peach tree. If I light a bonfire right here, the leaves on that peach tree are they're going to wilt. If not catch fire and burn, they're going to wilt, and then they're going to, it's not going to produce fruit that year. It may or may not die. But how does a car completely melt this close to an orange tree, but the orange tree's fine? It doesn't make any sense. And also the California fires, those were directed energy weapons as well. There's a lady named, was it Judy Woods? Dr. Judy Woods, and she wrote, I think, a book and then did like a video talking about 9/11, and it said, where did the tower go? Where did the towers go? Something like that. And it talks about the directed energy weapons and the dustification that went on with the Twin Towers and everything. There should have been 30 stories worth of rubble going on there, and there weren't 30 stories worth of rubble. There was far less. Yeah, and then the third tower, and yeah. I mean, there's no, what tower? Yeah. So yeah, the smart meters. I don't know if that necessarily played a role, unless it acts as some sort of if it can act like some sort of radio tower to kind of direct these storms. I don't know if that played a role in North Carolina. I know a lot of the rural areas did not have smart meters yet. Okay. There you go. That's new to me. I didn't know that. I knew they were bad. I know they turned the frogs gay, but I didn't know anything else about it. Go ahead. I'm so glad you brought that up. Yeah. 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 So did they have did it play out according to plan? I would say no. I don't think it was nearly as devastating, even though it was very, very devastating. I don't think they expected people to come help. Had they had that happen somewhere else, then it may have worked. But I don't think they expected so many people to come help and people to still come and help. I see you. I'll get yeah. But yeah, I don't think they expected people to come help, at least, especially to the extent, like there's still a group of Amish that are still rebuilding in Chimney Rock, North Carolina. They're fantastic people. I think they're out of Ohio or either Pennsylvania. But yeah, I don't think they had the intended reaction, and then also I don't think they're done. Take this with what you will. But after my first trip, I was coming back to get the truck worked on because it went through some things, and yeah. I was coming back to my home to get the truck worked on and then also check on the wife and baby because they were at home by themselves. And as I was leaving the mountain, I had like an awake vision of these mountains on fire. I don't know what to do with that necessarily other than like tell my parents, hey, this is a possibility. And then fast forward to earlier this spring. The mountains were on fire. I don't know if you guys caught the wildfires that were going on over in North Carolina, but I think that may have been a little test run to see how effective these wildfires will be and what's the response to these wildfires and are they able to keep up with them. North Carolina does get some wildfires every once in a while, but rarely is it that bad. I think the worst one was in like 1940s, and that was a group of arsons that were like intentionally setting fires everywhere, and then just poor like fire management habits in the 1940s. But yeah, the mountains were on fire, and I don't think they're done. This October, I'll actually be up in the area again, and believe me, it's in the back of my mind. Keep an eye out for hurricanes. Yeah, I don't think they're done. I don't think they're done at all because they still haven't had a lot of people sell. Like there's people just waiting for you to say, yeah, I want to sell this property for bottom dollar. Beforehand, they would have had to pay top dollar because it was still like usable land. Now they are able to pay bottom dollar because it's completely wiped out. And then As soon as they call it like a Superfund site, it's completely contaminated, then they're just going to acquire it anyways, wait a couple of years, and then just say, oh, we found this awesome thing called biology, soil biology. We're going to go ahead and clean up this area, and then we're going to start mining lithium, and they're going to strip mine those mountains. That's also the reason my dad, he has successfully cleaned up the area. Like in the test sites he's done, he has successfully cleaned them up. They are better than they were before the disaster. He has been bribed multiple times. There have been organizations, like, oh, okay, so he's not sold out. Let me clear that up. He's still doing the Lord's work. But he has been offered bribes multiple times, saying, hey, if you use our product, don't worry about what it is. If you use our product, then money's no longer an issue for you for the rest of your life. Just use this product. And then dad just being like slightly not paying attention. He's like, yeah, dude, I'm going to test it, and then if it works, then I'll use it. And they're like, no, just go ahead and do this. And he's like, no, dummy, I'm going to test it and then see. And then later he talks to other people, and they're like, yeah, dude, that was a bribe. And that's happened multiple times. What was your question? Man, so back in the beginning of time, Eve bit the apple, and evil has been on the earth ever since. I don't know why. I honestly don't know why they lie about the death toll. They also kept it from the radio, like they kept it from the news. Like, my parents live in that area, and I didn't know there was a hurricane that hit that until like 2 or 3 days later. Speaking of communications, here's a little interesting tidbit. The hurricane hit, and then it left. Communications were still up. 2 days later, communications all of a sudden go down. Why? Like they said, like they shut down the cell service. Nobody was able to communicate out of that at all. And it was after the event came and went. Go ahead. So yeah, there was one. Okay, so I've been to the FEMA camps, the two locations, the one in Asheville and the one in Irwin, Tennessee. There was nothing going on there. Like, there was no benefit. Now, there were some maybe issues with the militias. This is kind of hard to suss out. There was something called the Cajun Navy that came out. It was for sure. Everybody, like multiple witnesses, not related, different areas, were saying Cajun Navy, not Cajun Army. And then everything that they had, everything they were wearing was super branded Cajun Navy. Immediately I'm thinking, like, all right, I imagine everybody in the Cajun Navy probably ain't like head to toe, dude up in Cajun Navy branded clothing. It seems a little odd. But apparently the Cajun Navy came out and they tried to take over supply points and then kind of control it that way. And then the locals like kicked them out and they're like, no, this ain't happening. And then also there was one supply point in Burnsville, North Carolina that had everything out on the table. Like they had tables and everything, and this helicopter tried to land. They were claiming that they were Cajun Navy, but it was a black unmarked helicopter. If it's unmarked, I don't know what the first time I ever heard of Cajun Navy was out this. It's apparently some Louisiana-based militia. There's like another Cajun Army. I've heard good things about the Cajun Army. And then there's also like a bunch of different like variations of Cajun Army as well. So I'm not entirely sure. What's up? Yeah. And it seemed highly unusual. Like every coon ass I ever met was super friendly and made awesome food. That's the name for them, by the way. Yeah, they made awesome food. Like that's not a derogatory term. That's what they call themselves. Go ahead. Yeah, that's a good point. It might be easier to acquire if it's completely abandoned and everything. I'm not sure. Yeah, that's a good point. And if anybody noticed, there was nothing really on the news about Hurricane Helene for the most part. Like I said, my parents live in the area, and I didn't even know anything happened at first. Like it was like I remember, like I found out what happened, and then I tried to call Dad, And then knowing his elevation, knowing where he lives, I was like, all right, he's not affected by the floods. He's going to call me back whenever he gets a chance. And it's getting to the point where I'm about to head out. And then he calls me. He's like, hey, we had to drive to Tennessee just to get cell service. For some reason, the cell towers are turned off. We have to drive to Tennessee to even get service out to you, or even get a call out to you. And then I asked him, I was like, do I need to come down? What's it looking like down there? And then Dad, obviously wanting me to stay with the wife and baby, was like, no, we got it. Don't worry about it. Stay there. And then I end up finding out from other, sources of information that, no, there are whole hollers, whole towns, whole everything just completely wiped out and gone forever. Yeah. Yeah. So there's also that in that area. There's also a lot of Airbnbs as well. But yeah. So the people that had so they have what's called halfbackers over in North Carolina. They move from New York down to Florida, realize it's too hot, and then move halfway back up into North Carolina. And they usually go down to Florida during the winter, and then they come to North Carolina during the summer because it's that part of North Carolina, there's more perfect weather days than there are not. So some people, a lot of those guys, left as soon as they heard that there was a hurricane coming. They're like, all right, I'm just going to my other house. And they left as soon as the hurricane came. But a lot of the other people that were generational, they were thinking I'm familiar with the worst flood we've ever had. I'm however many feet above that flood line. I'll be fine. And those people are underneath miles or piles of sediment right now. They're y'all, if you go back just even 80 years, the backbone of every community was the grist mill, which had to be by a water source, but also the barn that was going to be higher up in the landscape. The tobacco barn. That was everybody's source of income. That was their livelihood and everything. They put that in areas that would not be affected by floods. There are a lot of historic tobacco barns that are now completely gone because this is the highest flood that has ever happened in that part of North Carolina. Now, believe it or not, the hardest people to convince that this is a direct attack are the people that live in North Carolina. One thing that was disturbing, the community came together, but as soon as that power came back on, their urge to fight and their rage went away. Before that power came on, they were like, yeah, this was intentional. This is unusual. There's something going on here. As soon as the power came back on, everybody was fine again. Everybody was like, oh, I'm going to go back to being a slave. I'm perfectly fine with that. I have my bread. I have my circuses. We're completely content. And, yeah. Yeah. Yep. Died from COVID. Yep. Yeah. They didn't do that here. Now, another thing. I mean, obviously, yeah, that stood out. But another thing that stood out was having preps in multiple locations. My parents, for example, they had preps in multiple locations. One of those locations was down by a creek in Barnardsville that got wiped out. So the preps that they had there were completely wiped out, but their other locations were completely fine. So think about that. Don't store everything in necessarily one location. Think about what natural disasters could occur in your area and adjust accordingly. Let's say a wildfire is coming through Lawrence, Kansas, and I live in the woods. Well, a wildfire is going to directly affect the woods. Maybe put a secondary location or a secondary prep location somewhere in maybe a pasture or in a disconnecting woods possibly. Having multiple locations to go to and having, there's the old saying, two is one is none. That was definitely the case because there were a lot of well-prepared people that just lived that life. That they weren't necessarily the prepper or anything like that. They just lived that life because that's the way their parents did and that's the way their grandparents did up in these hollers that had all of their canned goods, all of their stored away food, all of their extra medication. All of that was wiped out in their house. Everybody who was by a body of water got destroyed. Everybody who's by a body of water got destroyed. And you're thinking, okay, if I'm a higher elevation, that's going to save me from a flood. But remember, the amount of water that goes over Niagara in the course of 2 years occurred in 2 hours in North Carolina. The people that were high up in landscape were affected by the landslides. So just because there was a difference between being like built out of the mountain and then cutting into the mountain. The people that cut in, generally okay. The people that were built out were the ones that went downhill into the dam, into the creek, and were washed downstream. Go ahead, all the way in the back. Yeah, let me make sure. Okay, I wanted to make sure I was behind the speaker when I started talking. But yeah, Starlink and Elon. So, I think the dude is a little crazy. His little breeding program is weird. But Elon, it just is what it is. He's got like 13 baby mamas or something. But he dropped off a bunch of Starlinks in the area, and some FEMA camps were not handing those out. Like some of the SERP that I'm saying FEMA camps, but they're the ones that put the title on it. But Starlink was a major form of communication out in the area. Say what you will about the man, but that was one thing that fantastic that he did. Now, is it part of like a kind of covering his own butt? Because who uses a lot of lithium? Tesla does. He directly benefits from lithium being harvested in those mountains. So as far as like the bigger picture, I'm not entirely sure. But yeah, he did drop off Starlink, and it was fantastic. That was one of the few reliable sources of communication. There were 3 different satellite phones that we tried to use out there. Not one of them worked. Everybody was like, they were all super well charged, but for some reason, these 3 different satellite phones would not work. And then we'd leave the area just to see if the satellite phone was broken or something was going on in the area. Then they started working, like on the way back to Texas, the satellite phone started working. So that was unusual. I don't know what that was about. Yeah. It may be the scramblers. I honestly don't know. But that was weird that 3 separate satellite phones, 3 separate companies, they were not working in the area. Go ahead. Potentially, can they selectively shut off areas of communication? So, potentially, like I said, man, I'm good at growing food. Everything else, I'm crap out. As far as like communications go, I really don't know. So 5G, they can. Yeah. So I don't know why it's harder to see a horse die than it is a human die. I don't know why, but that's the case. Um, yeah, there were a lot of livestock that, like, when you went out immediately after and you got into these hollers and stuff, there were a lot of very damaged livestock that were kind of wandering around. And then there were also some animals that were completely fine. They just got in the water a little bit, and then they were completely fine. But a lot of people have to restart, especially when it was their livelihood. Like a lot of people had like cows down by the river. They had, not that that's a good place to, put cows, because their waste is going to go directly into the river, and that's too intense. It needs to go through a riparian edge and then filter and all that. But yeah, maybe don't have your livestock. This just backs it up further. Don't have your livestock directly into your water source or anything like that. But yeah, the people with livestock, a lot of them had to restart. A lot of them had to find something else to do, because a lot of it got wiped out. Now, there are other people that had them in different locations. Like I said, the disaster zone was spotty. It's like Mars Hill was perfectly fine, but if you go over to Burnsville, you go to Barnardsville, you go to Asheville, you go to Marshall, complete devastation. And even parts in Marshall, depending on where you are in Marshall, completely fine, no issues at all. The biggest thing that happened in those areas was like access being cut off. Because there's usually in these hollers, might be 2 ways in and out, maybe 3 ways went in and out, but usually all those ways, unless it was an old mountain pass, which are sketchy in a trailer. Yeah, I found that out the hard way. You can't reverse out of that. Yeah, it gets sketchy, but unless it's like an old mountain pass, you only have 1 or 2 ways in and out of these hollers. Yeah. Control the weather. Yeah, Next-Rad radio towers. That's how they control and amplify and steer these storms. But it actually goes quite a ways back. In fact, I remember in high school, they did this Disney documentary that took place in the 1950s of them steering a hurricane away from Florida. But the butterfly effect of that was actually it had serious tornadoes in Kansas after that, after they steered it. Because there's a butterfly effect. Like, the entire world's climate works together. Like, if I affect rain, and then also Dubai, they openly make it rain. Like, they say this, they make it rain every 2 weeks because the oil tycoons are like, yeah, it'd be nice if it rained in the desert. So, yeah, they do that. It's not a secret. Operation Popeye over in Vietnam, they were increasing the monsoons during that monsoon season. Yeah, this isn't some conspiracy theory. This is just like, this is a fact. You can either choose to believe the fact or you can put your head in the sand and then your cheeks are up in the air. I love Joel's laugh. Yeah, you can use sound to direct and amplify these storms. Yeah, a lot of people call it HARP. HARP is outdated. They have like Mirage, which is a mobile system. They have a lot of the Next-Rad radio towers. If we look up in the sky, okay, anybody notice that we don't have blue skies anymore? Like, it's kind of blue, but it's hazy. It's not blue anymore. Anytime you see a plane fly by and that contrail lasts for an extended period of time, just pay attention next time you see a plane fly by. See if that contrail dissipates and turns into nothing. It used to, but now what it does is it stays for an extended period of time, and then it slowly goes out, and then you'll notice that, oh, we have hazy skies now. Let's see what's happening. What's his name? Mike Adams recently tested some of what they're dropping from the sky. I think, oh, man. Yeah, there was a lady, yeah. So, like, strontium, barium, a bunch of barium salts are being sprayed in the sky to make it a little bit more susceptible to the radio waves, like, I'm assuming. Again, I'm a farmer. Yeah, so I actually agree with, like, the blue-haired, purple-breathing Marchies whenever they say there's climate change. It's just the cause of climate change is where we disagree on. Yeah, so if you check out Dane Wigington at geoengineeringwatch.org, he completely puts it out on the table. He completely shows you and shows maps and all that stuff of what towers are being activated, how they're directly steering these storms and everything like that, what's natural and what's unnatural. And here's the thing, if we stop today with all geoengineering, there's still effects from what we've done so far. There's still the butterfly effect, like up to and not, if not past 20 years of damage and consequences just from doing that. The climate has to then, like, rebalance itself. So, yeah, no problem. That I'm not familiar with. I don't know if he followed through on the weird destruction patterns of the tornadoes. I did drive through quite a few of those areas, over 200 tornadoes over in western North Carolina, and they looked like they would literally touch down, destroy, and then lift back up again. There was very little, like, I grew up, like, my first memory is running from the May 3rd tornado in Oklahoma, in Moore, Oklahoma. Like, I remember we were driving to the mall, which is in the direction of the tornado. I'm like, as a little kid, I'm like, this doesn't make sense. But yeah, I'm familiar with tornadoes. I grew up in Tonganoxie, Kansas, just on the other side of Lawrence. I'm familiar with tornadoes. And there was no, like, destruction path, really. It was literally, like, just a burst of energy, and then it was gone. And then a burst of energy, and then it was gone. It does seem odd that a lot of trees fell uphill. That does seem odd, especially on those steeper mountainsides. But it was weird. Like, one neighbor who had maybe 200 acres of, like, he was intending on harvesting this forest at some point and turning it into lumber to a certain extent. That was all gone. Like, his retirement was immediately gone within 30 minutes of this tornado, completely gone. But then his next door neighbor had, like, pristine land. Like, there were no issues. Yeah, he had some erosion from the rain event and stuff, but he didn't have any, like, tornado damage or anything like that, high wind damage, nothing like that. Yeah, super odd. These little weird micro bursts coming out of nowhere was an odd event, especially when you're in the mountains of North Carolina. Like, the mountains get in the doggone way, and there were over 200 tornadoes in North Carolina. That's interesting. That's new to me. I didn't know that. Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be the first pattern that was odd there. And then also immediately after, there were quite a few children over at the Cherokee Reservation that are no longer accounted for after the disaster because was it DHA, I think, in North Carolina. It's not CPA. I think it's DHA or something like that in North Carolina. They came into the reservation and they're like, oh, your children are in unfit conditions because of the storm that just happened. We're going to go ahead and take your children. And they have never been accounted for since. There are also some, yeah, I won't go there. There's a lot of sketchy stuff going on there. There are a lot of fake NGOs. Okay, so I was in Elk Ridge, Tennessee. I was actually at a Home Depot picking up a truckload of generators because I don't know if anybody knew, but I had a GoFundMe going on. If anybody here donated to that, thank you guys so much. Thank you so much. Like that, I'll tell you later of the families that you helped. But yeah, I had a GoFundMe, and it raised over $50,000. That was insane. Thank you guys so much for donating. I did not expect that. I was thinking, like, yeah, we can buy a couple generators. No, that was tons of generators and tons of fuel and tons of other supplies that we were able to bring to these people because of you guys. Yeah, but I was at Home Depot picking up a truck full of generators, and there was this lady that came up to me and said, hey, are you going to Elk Ridge, Tennessee? I was like, I don't even know where that is. I've never heard of that before. And she was like, well, these people, like, just now started getting hot meals. And I was like, oh, wow, okay. Like, give me the information, and I'll run it back to, I think Kyle was in charge of Cherry Grove at that time. Not this Kyle, different Kyle. Same height, though. Every Kyle's big. Went back to Kyle, and I was like, hey, I got this information on this place. Let me go recon it and see what we can bring out there and see what they need help with and stuff like that. So I drop off the generators, and I go out with another radio guy, and we go recon this place called Elk Ridge, Tennessee. And I see that there's a organization. The first thing I notice is that there's a brand-new concrete pad poured at the bottom of the mountains, and over by the river, there's a brand-new concrete pad, and then there's this trailer and another trailer that's the generator for the other trailer. And I go up there, I'm like, all right, this must be the headquarters of this area. It seems like they've had hot meals for a while. That stood out, because if they've got a brand-new concrete pad, you know, that's some sort of infrastructure. And then I go talk to this lady named Tracy Chapman. And she's, yeah, Tracy Chapman. Everybody remember that name. And she's part of the Christian, it's basically a bunch of ordained ministers or something like that. Christian ordained ministers of something. It's along those lines. They've changed their website since I started talking about it. Coincidence? Maybe. I don't think so, though. Because I talked about her on some pretty big platforms. But yeah, Tracy Chapman. I go up and I go to the trailer and I say, hey, I'm with Grindstone Ministries. We're here to help. We're from the government. We're here to, no. But yeah, we came over and said, hey, I'm here to help. I need to know, like, here's what we have access to. We have tree crews. We have, like, excavating crews. We have tons of food. We have whatever supplies these people need. And she's like, oh, cool. We have over 300 members in this community. She said, like, we need all of that. Like, whatever you can bring, we need all of that. And I'm like, cool. She'd already had all the recon done. She had a dossier on everybody in the community. She, like, was squared away as far as that goes. So then I run back. And this is about a 2.5-hour trip with truck and trailer and equipment. And then I run back to Grindstone, and we plan for the next day. We had a total of 16 people, 8 vehicles, and 8 pieces of equipment, all running out to Elk Ridge, Tennessee the next day. We finally show up there, and then I go up to Tracy Chapman, and I'm like, hey, we're here. And she's like, cool, I need everybody to sign this waiver first. And we're like, at first I'm like, that's odd. And then I grab the pack of papers, and I run over to the guys, and as I'm coming back, I'm like, doesn't feel right. And then I asked them, I was like, hey, she's asking for this waiver. And immediately, like, people are shaking their heads, no. Like, no, we're not signing this waiver. And then we start looking at the waiver, and we start, like, analyzing what it's actually saying. And the last paragraph of that waiver was saying, like, you agree to comply with every law, ordinance, mandate, forever, for the rest of your life that the government comes out with. And we're like, oh, do you? No. And then as soon as we just decide, like, this is absolutely not, we're not doing this, as soon as she comes over, as soon as we decide that, she comes over on her side-by-side. She had, like, a chauffeur. Like, she had somebody driving her around everywhere. She looked like the secretary from Monsters, Inc. Does anybody know that? That's what she looked like. Yep. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, she looked like the secretary from Monsters, Inc. And As soon as she comes over, she starts clapping her hands. She's like, I need my papers. I need my papers. And which just pissed me off immediately. I don't know why, but it did. And, and I was like, well, we just all decided that we're not signing these papers. And she just, like, her brain broke. She's like, no, if you guys are going to do any work here, you need to sign those papers. And I'm like, no, we're not signing. For some reason, I'm in charge of this group. I don't know what Kyle was thinking. I'm in charge of this group I'm the spokesperson for this group. And I was like, no, we're not signing these papers. We're going to still help these people out, but we're not going to sign these papers. And she just, like, she could not have a conversation outside of us signing these papers. And I'm like, woman, I don't, like, you're just saying the same thing over and again. We're going to go see who needs help, and we're not going to sign these papers. And you can either help us, or I can spend a day doing the same recon that you've already done. You can either help us, or you can just, like, stay over there and be quiet. And then she calls the state trooper that's kind of, like, on lookout of the entrance of the area. Because I went the back way, the way you're not supposed to go in the first time, and then she told me, it was like, yeah, there's an undercut bridge that you went over, and I was like, oh, okay, that's good to know. I won't go that way again. And then I went around the other way, and there's a state trooper maintaining that entrance, making sure, like, people don't just accidentally get stuck out there, because there's no reverse option. There's no place to turn around or anything like that. So she calls him. And then he sends one of the deputies out along with, like, some brand new guy who left the prison system. He's a prison guard and then just became a cop. And he's, like, brand new to the area and still had peach fuzz on his face. And they come over, and she's from, like, back east, like up in, I think, New Hampshire or something like that. She had a thick accent, but she was one of us. She was a country boy. She loved it. But she came up, and she was like, what seems to be the issue? And I'm like, I don't know. This lady lost her mind. She thinks we have to sign this waiver in order to help people. And then she's like, all right, let me go talk to the state trooper. She talks to the state trooper, and she's like, no, you guys can do whatever you want here. Like, you guys aren't looters. There's no issues here. You can do whatever you want here. And we were like, that's what we've been saying. And then we spend the day doing the rest of the recon. And then that deputy that came over to us and talked to us, she went over to talk to that Tracy Chapman lady. No, I'm sorry, I said Tracy Chapman. I meant Tracy Elder. Tracy Chapman's a singer, isn't she? Yeah, I'm sorry. Forget Tracy Chapman. Tracy Elder. I got that mixed up. Sorry. Yeah, Tracy Elder. And anybody want to do some investigating, there you go. And it's all public information. I didn't dox her or anything like that. But yeah, she goes over and talks to Tracy Elder, and she's like, hey, they can do whatever they want here. Like, you don't have, like, this isn't your area. You have no, like, say in this area. You guys were just one of the first ones to show up and really haven't done anything. They had a supply point that only had 2 days worth of anything at one point, max. And she said she didn't want any more than 2 days worth of supplies for anything at one point, which I thought was odd. But yeah, that's what that was. So we start doing recon in the area, and then we find out all the locals can't stand this lady. They've been flattening her tires. They've been siphoning gas. They've been taking diesel out of the generator. They're doing everything they can to get this lady to leave, and she's not taking the hint. She poured a permanent concrete pad. She might still be there. Yeah, but they can't stand this lady, and they've been doing everything they can. But the community, for the most part, has everything they need except for the power, and the linemen are on their way. So we find out, like, oh, this lady lied about how bad this area was. So that way she has her own little personal fiefdom for a little bit longer. She lied about how bad this area was. Everything that we brought to actually help these people has already been taken care of by the locals, by the community. They had bigger excavators than we brought, that was for sure. And everybody had access. Everybody had food. Everybody had their medication. There were people making supplies runs to and from town. They did take some diesel just because, like, everybody's using diesel at that point. And, yeah, so we found out that she's one of those fake NGOs. And the reason, Kyle was saying that the reason that she wanted us to sign those waivers was that she could get reimbursed for the labor that she had out there underneath her organization. That was the whole reasoning behind it. But this lady literally had not moved a pebble in this community. All she did was pour out that concrete pad, had somebody come in. That was a brave concrete truck. Came in, poured that concrete pad, put her trailer on, and then the other generator, it was a massive generator. Like, it was the size of somebody's cargo trailer. Like, it was massive. It could have powered maybe a small community. But all that was there for was to regulate the temperature of this reptile in her little trailer. And it was like a FEMA trailer with, like, 3 different offices. I'm speaking frankly, y'all. I'm sorry. She was functionally a looter, yeah. They did. They were. Yeah, the community. I don't know. A lot of people had pigs out there. She might not be alive. I don't know. And then her cuck husband was like, I'm speaking frankly to this woman, like, hey, woman, like, we are never going to sign these waivers. I'm raising my voice to this woman because she's not understanding anything. And then this just hurt my heart as a pimp and a man, that this dude is just allowing somebody, permaculture is my passion, pimp, that he's allowing somebody to talk to his wife this way. Not that I was inappropriate or anything like that. It's just like, if somebody's raising my voice to my wife, as soon as I show up, no, you're not. Like, you're talking to me now. And this guy was just sitting there allowing this to happen. I don't know why I'm telling you that, but yeah, it just hurt. Go ahead. Yeah, this is cathartic for me. Thank y'all. So, what made what to the internet? It's not over. Yeah. So, Grindstone Ministries is a disaster relief organization. Am I correct, JT? Yeah, it's a disaster relief organization. They go there. The first ones, I think I've heard Bear say, like, he wants to be the first one people see after disaster. Like, he wants to be able to be there and provide comfort, food, shelter, immediate relief, and then hand it off, like, responsibly to the next people who are going to rebuild the area. But to quote Bear, we were the Amazon for hill people. Like, whatever, we had over millions of dollars worth of product coming in and out of just this one location in Cherry Grove, and we're able to bring it to whoever needed what. Like, no matter what it was, we got you. Like, there's a, never mind. There's a song that I was going to quote, but it's not appropriate around kids. I'm the pusher man. Yeah. But anything anybody needed, we're able to bring to it because of y'all. Like, everybody who donated to that cause, that was the reason. But yeah, the adventures still aren't over. There's still a lot of shenanigans going on in that area. There's still a lot of relief to be brought. There's still a lot of, like, if you go out there now, if I can show you areas in Asheville, North Carolina, the main city in that part, and it looks like it did the day after the disaster happened. They got $2 billion worth of funding, but none of it has been used on the surrounding area. How am I doing on time, Bobby? 5 minutes. Any last questions? Go ahead. Right. So if let's say this happens again in October, I will bring a lot less food. That's for sure. I will bring a different vehicle. I brought an F-350. That just doesn't fit on some roads out there. I would bring like a Hilux would be awesome. If anybody has a Hilux they want to donate, talk to me. That'd be amazing. Or even like purchase a disaster relief vehicle. That would be amazing. But yeah, F-350 was the wrong vehicle to be out there. I brought a lot of food and I brought a lot of water. But depending on the season, let's say it happens in October again, I'm bringing as much fuel as I can legally carry without a CDL. I'm bringing all kinds of gas canisters and stuff like that, and I'm bringing a plethora of medication and or like herbal equivalents if I can. Go ahead. Um, I'm not saying they didn't do anything. I just didn't see them, and I was everywhere. Ooh, I wasn't expecting that. So my method of coping is I bottle that stuff up and I shove it way down deep. And I mean, there's stuff that I saw that I don't talk about. I don't know. This might be an immature way of dealing with it. I just don't know. Yeah. Yeah. I just don't. And it's worked so far. It just doesn't benefit anybody. Like, yeah, it's bad. A lot of people died. Me saying, I don't know. In the moment, how do you deal with that? I don't know. I don't know if this is like a learned skill or like something that was just inherent with me, but I've always reacted well in like bad situations. I don't know. I just react well in bad situations. Like I remember in high school, my cars, got done being a lifeguard. I was off work, and me and my friend were gonna go party. That's what we were gonna do. And we stopped at my house to change, and we took literally just 2 minutes to change, just change, really, wash the chlorine off ourselves. And in the 2 minutes it took us to do that, we came back out, and my friend's Jeep was on fire right behind my truck. And I turned back around, I was like, hey, Seth, your Jeep is on fire. And he's like, ha, ha, ha. And then I'm like, no, seriously, dude, it's on fire. And I told him just like that because I didn't want to freak him out. But incidents like that, and then there are also some, I don't know. I just react well under that issue, and then, yeah. Go ahead. Thank you. Yeah, I believe it. I believe it. It's just, it's honestly just not something that's crossed my mind. There's also people that have, I wasn't there. I didn't see my wife and my family and everybody around me die in that flood. I'm fine. I will be okay. There was one guy that I can think of. There was a group of guys that were walking up to him, and he was buried about this high in the mud, and he's just weeping. And the people coming to get him were like, hey, we're here. We're going to get you out. Just give us a minute. We're going to dig you out. And he's like, leave me here. And they're like, no, we're not going to leave you here. He's yelling at them, leave me here. And they're asking well, why do you want to be left here? And he's like, because my family, who's in a cavity underneath him, stopped scratching 2 days ago. They stopped scratching his feet 2 days ago. Compared to that, I have my wife. I have my family. I have my baby. I haven't lost a single thing. I'm fine. There are a lot of people that are forever changed because of that event. I would like to leave this on a happy note.
There you go. How do you help?
How do you help? Sign up for Grindstone's email list. I think they send out an email whenever they're being deployed and everything. Sign up for that list, and they'll let you know. I don't know. I'm a dumb farmer. I just felt the urge to go out there, reacted. If you feel the urge to go somewhere and help, just help. Just don't get in the way, but help. Yeah.
All right, guys. I think we're going to end it there. Let's go ahead and give William a round of applause. He will be around. If you have more questions, let's go ahead and take it out. William, thank you so much. Thank you, William.